control later.
I think, but that means we're sort of swapping over, doesn't it? Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And hello everyone. Look, it is still a surprise and definitely an honour to be here and to be speaking to you beekeepers. And while I have kept bees all my life and my dad kept bees, it was very much one of our many hobbies and activities. And so I wouldn't consider myself as an experienced beekeeper, as many of you in the room. So, and as you all know, beekeepers have at least, well, 2 beekeepers will have at least 5 opinions on what's supposed to happen. And so, you know, that's one of the marvellous things about beekeeping is the differing opinions and ideas, really. But it's tough on beginners. So thank you very much, Jeffrey. Thank you, Penny, Mona, and so where were we? We're on swarm control, and yes. So the idea is to get new foundation into your brood box somehow. So with a flow hive, it is more difficult because you can't just shift the brood up to the top. But you could generally on the outside of the brood, they're storing more pollen and more honey. And if you know that it's the springtime, there's going to be a good flow on, that is the nectar's coming in, so they're not going to be short of honey or pollen, or nectar or pollen, then you could take out those side ones. The reason they have honey around their brood is to help stabilise the temperature around the brood. The honey will sort of keep the, you know, it's heavy, it holds the temperature, and so it'll keep it at that 34-ish sort of degrees. You can, if the weather's warmer, you can safely shift those outside frames, put some fresh ones right on the inside, and chew on the outside ones yourself or whatever you'd like to do. That's one solution. Yes, there is a solution of putting another super on, and there's also a solution of you can get a hybrid flow, which is half flow frames and half standard frames, and therefore you're able to do that. One of the problems with putting a second super on, it depends on the colony and what's going on, is the bees, when we've done, Cedar and I have done experiments with what bees prefer, of course they'll prefer wax foundation first to build on. They'll always go for that. Secondly, they'll prefer flow frames over plastic foundation, we found. And then both plastic foundation and flow frames benefit by splashing some beeswax on them to get the bees interested and so on. But that's one of the problems with putting a second super of waxed or you know, perhaps fully drawn but honeycomb, is that the bees will go for that first. And if you're trying to get them to fill the flow frame so that you can tap out your honey and so on, then you know, it'll be a little bit longer because they've got a whole other super to fill. Okay. There's so much, isn't there, in swarm prevention. We've been working with a Canadian professional, and he uses a method which name I've forgotten, and some of you may know it well. Beginning of the season, he'll shake all the bees out of his hives onto a white sheet in front of the hive, pull out all of the old brood, and replace it with brand new frames of foundation. And the bees crawl back in their hive, and they start all over again. So for him, that's disease prevention. The old frames are out, but it also triggers, oh, we've already swarmed somehow to the bees. So he says they don't swarm because they're sort of starting all over again. So if you want to, I haven't done that. I've seen videos of him doing it, him and his daughter, but I'm tempted to do it just for fun.
Those frames have got brood on them? Have we got?
Yeah, he loses his early brood. He loses all of that. But you know, they have varroa and things like that, so it's all part of disease prevention as far as he's concerned. And he, like many professionals, invests in very expensive, high quality queens. So they just don't muck around his bee, and they work very hard. And the flow in Canada, where he lives, is extraordinary. So he's got one brood box, sometimes 2, with 5 flow supers on them, and they're filling them up. Anyway, so many lovely bee stories. I'm not sure where to start with you all. Perhaps I'll just say, in relation to me saying it's still a little surprise to find myself in this situation. It was just 3.5 years ago or so that Cedar and I, after 10 years of inventing and carrying on together, let's try, you know, crowdfunding out. Let's see if that's a way to get this thing to market and to raise some money, because in that 10-year journey of inventing the Flow Hive, in the last 3 years we've both sort of given up our employment and we were skidding along. I borrowed money from my brother and it was getting a little bit embarrassing. So we thought, well, we need to raise some money somehow. So some of you will know that effort of crowdfunding was it was such an astounding time, and it launched us into instant business people, and it's not really my sort of genetic makeup or something, being a businessman. So the reason I want to say that is because one thing that does keep me in the business is that we're able to do things like the pollinator program. And Penny, congratulations on winning one of those funding rounds. We were so pleased to make up the pollinator boxes out of our scraps, and we were surprised at how quickly they sold, and all of the profits from that did go into this fund, and we were able to fund efforts like yours all over Australia and in the US as well. And it's so touching to hear the stories, and this one of the kids being engaged. That's the sort of thing that really, really tickles me, and so congratulations, and I'm really sort of pleased to be associated with it. Now I don't know what to say, because you know, I can tell the story of the invention of the hive and so on, but I think a lot of you will know that. I'm more interested in responding to your questions and interests around, well, particularly the flow frames, and if it becomes beekeeping in general, we might invite a few others up, because as I said, I'm just, you know, one biased person in beekeeping.
Does anyone have a question for Stuart?
Yeah, just on the sorry.
There are a few back there too.
I'm a big proponent for the Flow Hive, as everyone
Yeah,
knows.
go ahead.
So, okay. When we were inspecting our flow frames, we noticed that there were areas of the frame that the bees hadn't built up. It looked okay, but they hadn't built up on certain areas.
Was it a moon shape?
No, straight down. So I thought, well, maybe if I extract that honey and then I do it a few times to realign. But that was quite surprising. I just didn't know what to do with that. Any suggestions?
I can't. That's very, very interesting. I can't remember someone coming up with that, except there've been one or two cases where it's been misassembled at the factory, and so some of the segments of the flow frame are out of line, and so there's some rows of hexagons and some rows of actual channel, which is what happens when you work it. So it's possible that happened, although, was yours an early Flow Hive? Was it one of the...
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more possible with the early. We tried to make that impossible for the workers in the factories to do that.
Yeah, we've got the three now, so I've sort of lost track. Do you know which one it was? I don't know.
While you're talking, I'll
Yeah.
just get out a... Well, there's a flow hive here, but I also have a little demonstration frame here somewhere. So we can just pass this around, but basically it's half a flow frame, just because it's easier to handle, and it does have the flow key in it, and there are two slots, and just play around with it. If you bend it sort of a long ways, it'll snap into 40 pieces, and I'll enjoy watching you trying to put it back together again.
Do you find that, because you know that bees like normal wax, do you find that a lot of people get benefit from putting molten wax over the flow frame to get the bees to start to go into it?
Yeah, in the morning. That's my recommended method is splash wax. Other people have put honey on it. Now, if it's honey from the same hive, that's okay. So if you've got what we call burr comb, maybe in the brood or around place, you could rub that into the flow frames because it's honey from the same hive. But you don't, I think you all know, you don't want to mix honey and wax from hive to hive. It's a disease and pest prevention thing. I have heard a sort of a slightly horrifying story of someone just going to the supermarket, grabbing some honey and splashing that all over their flow frames. And scary. That's scary because that honey may contain American foulbrood. That'd be the disease you'd be most mucking around like that. So other people have sprinkled like sugar and sugar water. Sugar syrup's a bit risky because it hardens and can lock things up. It hardens into quite a strong glue. So yeah, we recommend wax. But isn't it? It's not working either. There's 2 slots in the top there.
Sorry, Stu, I was just going to, I've heard you shouldn't feed your own bees their own honey, and maybe in this case too, because you encourage robbing. Would you agree with that? Because other bees will pick up on the scent if there's excess honey in the frame unexposed.
I'm a little bit surprised by that, but there'll be other opinions, as I said, because of course every time you open up a box for inspection, you're often tearing comb and there's honey dribbling. So beekeepers are used to honey from a hive dribbling itself. When they clear out the comb, some will dribble. So I've never worried about that. In fact, Cedar and I, you can imagine when we were doing the testing, we had all of these different models to test, most of which failed over this 10-year period. But waiting for the bees to fill up each different model and so we could test it, does it work, was very, very frustrating. And of course, luckily up on the north coast of New South Wales, we can count on a bit of a nectar flow most of the year. In fact, midsummer is sometimes our worst time. And so, but nevertheless, we did feed a honey back to the hive because we didn't want the flow frames filled with sugar water or anything, or syrup. We wanted it filled with honey. So we practiced that, get honey from the hive, feed it back to it so we could fill up our latest experiment. Didn't work, try another experiment and so on. And I just haven't, I can't remember that promoting any robbing at all, but going into robbing mode is a concern. And that once bees do start pinching honey from another hive, they go a bit manic.
I've just got a question about the flow hive. You know the sort of the floor that you can sort of put onto there's 2 spaces at the bottom, and I'm finding it's stuck and I just can't lever it out, and I sort of have been putting the key in to try and thinking maybe it's got wax at the bottom, and then and then I pull a little bit and then I break a little bit off it. So I'm not quite sure what I can do about that.
Yeah.
Apart from taking off the brood box entirely and dismantling it all, I guess.
Yeah, it's a hassle, and we have, with the Flow Hive too, we've taken that feedback and changed the model to being a tray. So those sliders, there are 2 positions. The top position allowed it to sort of seal up hard against the mesh, and also sometimes when you operate the flow frames, I think that's tickling away because I'm close to it. I don't know.
Bad placement speaking.
It's just doing it. Okay. Sometimes the flow frames leak when you work it, and bits of honey will dribble down over the brood and to the bottom. Well, if that slider, as we call it, is on the top slot, then the bees can lick through and clean it all up, as they would if you're cleaning off burr comb or whatever. They can reach it and clean it up. Whereas if it's in the lower slot, they can't quite get their tongues through it. And so generally we say, for that model, put it in the top slot for when you're harvesting, and then once the harvest is finished, an hour or 2 later, the bees will have cleaned, if there were any dribbles, they will have cleaned it up, and you put it back in the bottom slot again. That gives it more ventilation, it gives it that gap, but also it means that they can't propolis it up, because when it is in that top slot, they'll glue it up. And it's very, very annoying, and even 2 pairs of pliers and you still can't get it out. It's very frustrating.
So what should I do?
Now that it's stuck, there's no other way but to pull your hive apart. I mean, you can leave it in one piece and take the bottom board away while you work on it. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be very, very difficult because you can't even get it all the propolis. So hot water to soften the propolis once you've got it out. Away from the hive, and then pliers to try and pull it out.
Thanks, Stu. Just a follow-up question on that same issue. I've got a Flow Hive 1 and 2, and I really like the training of Flow Hive 2. Is there any prospect of redoing, like making a reverse, like making a tray for Flow Hive 1 and just putting it on the website, similar to the Flow Hive 2 tray? And my second part of the question is, I'm just interested in new innovations in terms of Flow Hive 2. Of course, it's got some innovations, but is there anything else on the radar that you can tell us about?
Yeah, okay. So first question is, I think you can buy that base. So we've combined sort of the legs and the base with Flow Hive 2, and it's adjustable legs if you want that kit and so on. So you can just buy that separately, I think. But I know that we're a little bit behind in production. And there's a bit of a wait with Flow Hive 2, so I apologise for that. But you can buy that base separately, and then you would get that tray and that different method and the little levels and so on. And yeah. And innovations that are coming up. One of the, I thought, quite valid criticisms of Flow Hive is they're saying, oh, well, you don't need to do that heavy lifting anymore because you can extract the honey, just with leaving the hive intact, which is quite true. But as you all know, you need to pull the hive apart to inspect it. And so you have to do heavy lifting. And so I've been working on a variety of different models for getting to the brood without having to lift anything. And there are already quite a few on them, around in beekeeping circles. Some of you might know the AZ or AZ hive that was made in Slovenia, where you open a cupboard door, and then behind a screen again, you can pull each frame out horizontally. And so I've played around with all sorts of designs. And the trick is most of the designs work. The trick is what's easily manufacturable, what looks elegant, and what's foolproof in terms of, is sort of simple to use and won't go, somehow won't get complicated in the use. And Cedar and I aren't confident, even though I think I must have made 20 or 30 different models now and had the bees in them and so on. Yeah, we're nearly there. We always think we're nearly there, but we'll try this next little way. So that's one thing that I hope we have available next year. And if you're interested in making your own, we can talk about that later. There's some pretty simple ideas for that. And then what else can I talk about? I'm working on automatic jar filler. So instead of running it into a big jar or even a big tub, if you're running several frames at once, why not straight into the jars and then put the caps on and you're done. So this is for a small scale commercial, or even someone who just doesn't want to do all of that honey decanting. And so the model is basically you connect these jars into pretty much the same tube that runs from the flow frame, turn your handle and come back an hour later and all the jars are filled automatically to the right height. And I think it's a good idea, but Cedar doesn't. And really, he's the boss. So it's stalled there. And if how many people would like an automatic jar filler? Oh, 300. Right. Yeah, so that's another thing. We're also there's some very interesting developments by other companies. It's not relevant yet to Australia. I hope it never does. But some interesting varroa treatments that are not using miticides and so on and chemicals in the same way. But I can't say too much more about that. And that's with another company, a New Zealand company. And there's also another interesting company that we're thinking to work with that has developed a way of like an app plus an additional bit of equipment that adds to a smartphone to analyse things. And it's a bit of a big story, but it does mean that commercial and perhaps club-based analysis of honey and honey adulteration and stuff will be possible. And that to me would be very exciting, because I think along with all of you, we all want people to get the best honey, unadulterated, you know, a really good quality honey is important to all of us. Yeah.
So I just had two things. One was about the base and the thing getting stuck.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up, I'm a bit of an impatient beekeeper. I want to find the answer on the internet now. I found it really hard. I didn't realise I could take a base from a Flow 2 and put it on a Flow 1. It's not clear that you can do that. I just assumed a Flow 2 was different. So I actually went out and eventually bought a regular Langstrom base, and I've done the whole changeover, and I've dug the thing out, and I've cleaned it up, and I'm just waiting to put it back on. But it's frustrating because that base can't harvest the honey till I get the other base back on, because the regular Langstrom base isn't tilted, so the honey flows out. So that's just a frustrating thing, that it's not clear where you can buy bits. It's very clear where you can buy a whole super for a Flow, or you can buy the Flow frames, but it's not clear where you can buy just a bit for the bottom. So that was just a frustration that I had, because I was with you right from the beginning. I crowd-funded you and had no clue what I was doing. I really don't.
We didn't either.
Yeah, and the other thing which is really refreshing to hear is the challenges where you do only have a brood box and a specialised super. And it was quite frustrating to start, because you said, you know, go along to your beekeeping fraternity, and you'd ask questions and they'd say, oh, but I don't have a Flow Hive. And you'd be like, so you just saying, yes, you can manage your brood in one box by doing this, this and this, is really helpful to hear, because when you're an absolute beginner beekeeper with brand new technology and you go along to get support and people go, well, I haven't used it, I really don't know, it was really, really hard. So I had a nice mentor, but he didn't know what he was doing either, so we just bumbled along together. And it's taken me, I bought your original box. I had to send the brood box back because you manufactured it inappropriately, and I had to get another one. It's literally taken me till this year to successfully get honey. So I've hung in with you, but it's been very hard. So I can understand all these people sticking their hands up and saying, I don't understand what to do, because it has been hard to find help. And if you don't have a lot of time to plough through 2,500 videos and questions, you know, if you just want an answer and you just want to buy a piece of kit, I found that very difficult, you know, to be an urban beekeeper with not a lot of time. So they were the two things.
All right, I'll try and remember that, but my lovely partner Michelle is here, and she'll probably do a better job of remembering to put that up at least as a frequently asked question, and both those aspects, and also improve our website so that sort of spare parts or other bits are, yeah. So I apologise and thank you for the feedback. That's always valuable, and yeah, we can always get better.
Question over here.
Hello, I'm Jane, and I'm really, really new to the beehive. You know, I've always wanted them, and I've rung up, I've read about them and all sorts of things. But for Mother's Day, our kids bought me a huge big Flow Hive, and everyone I've spoken to says just wait till spring. And I've rung a Nowra fellow, and I live in Primby down in past Wollongong, and I've rung a Warilla fellow, but none of them know anything about a Flow Hive, and they said, oh, just come down and get one of ours. And so I find it really difficult as well with this lady, but I'm not impatient, so I'll just keep persevering, and I love it. I love what you're all talking about, and thanks for being here. It's sort of great that the council have advertised it all. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Thanks very much for your help anyway.
Well, hopefully you can find one or two people in this club who will help you get, I mean, because it's swarm time, there are people with a few too many bees. Like, I'm one of those on the north coast. I'm going to be passing quite a few of my colonies along. I don't need as many as I have, and maybe there are others in that situation that can help you get set up. Just having said that, like was mentioned, when you just start a colony from a swarm, they can be a bit wilder, a bit more stingier, and so I would advise, with the collaboration of people who know what they're doing, requeening a swarm with with known gentle stock, because you'll have a nicer experience when you open up your hive.
I think, Stuart, in the early days when the Flow Hive was first out, we were very amateur ourselves as the general beekeeping population with the Flow Hives. I think in the last 3 years we've actually increased our knowledge on the Flow Hive, and we do have a lot of members now that actually have them. So, sorry, I don't know your name.
Jane.
Jane. By all means, please come and see me after the meeting, and I'm happy to find out someone in your area that does have a Flow Hive. And if they don't, if there's no one down your way, I'm happy for you to come to here to the club, and we can run through the Flow Hive that we have here in the apiary, and we're happy to pass on some information to you that way. It is something we'd also like to do maybe next year, is do an actual course for just the Flow Hive. So please bear with us. We're new at the Flow Hive as well, so but we are learning a lot, and hopefully Stuart, you can help us.
Well, there is another question coming, but just to say that basically the beekeeping, the brood box, the beekeeping is really just the same.
Yeah,
and so, so some beekeepers get a little bit, oh, what's this? And they haven't even looked in the bottom. I've had so many experienced beekeepers, and I've pulled apart the super, or pulled off over the super, even on a hive like no bees in it, and there's the normal frames there, and they go, oh, and all of a sudden they know where they are and what to do, because it's only the super that's different. And it doesn't take long to get to know that.
Can I ask, have you done a beginner's course yet on beekeeping?
No.
No, okay, that's probably what you need to do first of all.
Yeah,
And we do actually cover a little bit of Flow Hive in the beginner's course that we run here at the shop at the club. So we do go into the frames and that sort of thing as well with our beginner's course. And honestly, you can't, that's the best way to start, is to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
2nd of February, yeah, book
Right.
in. I think we're going to be adding a few more courses in the new year for beginners too, because of the numbers of people that are coming through. It's just amazing. Just a quick one thing I need to say too is everybody who has a hive needs to be registered with the DPI, and a part of that registration is that you must look through your brood box twice a year, and you must record the results. So please make sure everyone that's new to beekeeping that's one of the things that they do. All right. So, and that is the same whether it be a Flow Hive or a normal hive. Okay. Heads up. Yes.
Now, this is a bit off topic, but when are the native beehives coming online?
Do you mean the pollinator?
Pollinator beehives.
Pollinator houses, yeah. Quite soon. I know that the team was gearing up for that, but I didn't.
They're sold out.
Sold out already.
I didn't get any notification. I had my name on.
I'm sorry. Apparently they've sold out already. So.
Or was that last year's? That sold.
We just don't have enough work, factory scraps to.
How much do they sell for?
Come and join one of the kids' classes. You can learn how to make a bee habitat at the kids' classes.
I've got two questions. One is when you say splash the wax on the frames, what do you actually do and how do you do it? And the second question, how do you know that the honey's mature to actually harvest it?
Okay, great questions. Yeah, I was a bit blasé. Splash the wax. I heat up the wax, the beeswax and use a paintbrush, like a thicker paintbrush. And
is it just a light coating, or do you really slather it on?
Look, that question, is it a light coating or do you slather it on? Basically, all you're doing is saying to the bees, here's something you're familiar with. They'll come and pull it all off anyway. And that gets them engaged with the frame. So whether you splash it on heavily or lightly, it doesn't really matter. It's just getting them interested. Another way to get them interested, if some people are having trouble with the bees going up into the top, is to swap your brood box top to bottom with the super. So the bees have to come in the entrance, walk up through the flow frames, the super, to get up to their brood. Leave it like that for a couple of weeks and then swap them back again. By then they will have crawled all over the flow frames and got their smell and familiarity with it, and you'll be right. So, the second question was...
How do you know it's mature
Oh, how do you know? So that's a standard beekeeping question as well. How do you know that the your honey's matured? Well, basically, the simple answer is that it's capped. The bees will keep drying out that nectar and processing it until they're happy that the moisture content is around 18% or less. I mean, people argue about the percentage, and that means that the honey won't ferment. If it's a high moisture content, your honey will go off, and that's why it's important to wait till it is mature. And the definite way of, or nearly definite way of it, making sure it's mature is that it's been capped with wax. Now you can't see that from the outside. Well, you can on the very outside of an observation window of a flow hive. You can see it capped, and you can when you look down the end. It's a little bit hard to. When you're looking at that end view, you can sort of see the wax capping sometimes. But 2 days ago, I was extracting honey with a commercial beekeeper who was playing around with these, and her bees had filled all the way except to the last two lines of the end. So from the end, it looked like they hadn't done anything, but the hive was heavy. So the traditional way to figure out if your hive's ready was to heft it. For beekeepers to go, yep, she's ready. So you can get to know the weight of the hive, just lifting it. You can have the end view, but for beginners, we recommend pull them apart. Take your lid off, get to know them by pulling them out and seeing what the end view and the side view is telling you actually on the frames. Get to know them like that.
And then you just extract the ones that are actually filled.
And then you just extract the ones that are filled. You don't have to take them all. You can take half a frame if you want, instead of a full frame, just by inserting that key just halfway. And and you can do it at any time of the day or night, although in the same way with sawing, for some reason it's lovely in the late afternoon with the bees fanning off their day's harvest of nectar, and the smell around a hive in the afternoon and late afternoon is just wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate you on your perseverance for 10 years on developing it. Can you give a plotted process of what you went through to get to the end result, what didn't work and why it didn't work? Don't take 10 years to answer. Don't take 10 years to answer. Thank you.
I'll give you a couple of examples. So, thank you for the congratulations, and that mainly should go to my son Cedar, who was the driver. We both definitely did the inventing and the ideas together, and I was the lucky dad to get carried along. But when Cedar latches onto something, he is sort of dogged, and he just thought, if we could do this, this would be amazing. That's what he thought. And I was thinking, I don't think we can do it, but I'm along for the journey. So in the beginning, we were thinking about pulling the comb apart, like artificial comb apart horizontally, and we tried that, and Cedar carved out little intricate ways of the horizontal comb coming apart, and then we tried it, and the honey just sort of stayed there. I mean, mature honey, if you tip, even if it's uncapped, if you tip it like that, the honey will just stay in the cells. It doesn't come easily. So that didn't work. So then we thought, oh, maybe some pistons. We'll have a piston behind every cell. And at a certain point, we'll just go. And we didn't know how we would collect it, but it was how do you get the honey out of these cells? And then we thought, maybe going on a completely different tangent, what if you ran some nichrome wire? Now, nichrome wire is the stuff you use in your toaster. When you run an electric current through it, it heats up. And so what if we ran lots of nichrome wire down through the middle of honeycomb, and then put electric current on it and warm it to wax melting temperature? It's a bad idea, but we were trying everything, and we got the bee building on this wire, and we heated it up, and it didn't work. Lots of things just didn't work. So there's a few examples. So we were sort of stuck on the horizontal model for a long time, and Cedar said it was a couple of coffees into a morning of playing around with ideas when I started thinking, I wonder if you could do it vertically, and I couldn't quite picture it, and I was drawing things out and trying to get it right, and he looked over at what I was doing, and meanwhile he was still working on lots of other things, and he saw sort of what I was struggling with, and if you moved half the cells this way, and but the reason I'm sort of stuck is because right then I was sort of stuck. Like, is this going to work? But he saw and joined in. He said, "That's it." And he dropped all the other stuff we've been working on and said, "That's going to work." And so we followed up this splitting the cells vertically, and that still took a long time to get right. Some of you who are used to beekeeping would immediately recognise that the cells are being tipped from having their point upwards on the hexagon to the flat upwards. They have to do that for the flow hive. We thought, will the bees worry about that? No, they don't care at all. In fact, bees will build in squares if you want, all sorts of shapes. But it took a long time to get it right. Yeah. Thanks.
Hi. I've had a flow hive for about, I was a founding supporter as well, like Isley, and also like Maris. And I reckon I get 90% of my information from your Flow forum, reading online. Some of the information's not quite relevant because it's Northern Hemisphere people, but most of it is just really, really helpful, particularly for the people that are saying that their mentors have just got traditional hives. But one of the things I noticed with Northern Hemisphere people, they take their supers off over winter because, they keep the bees just all in the brood and that sort of thing. So the 4 years that I've been doing it, now going into my 4th summer, I actually keep my supers on, and I've found that I've had enough honey, to even like take a frame or two over winter a month. But this last winter, maybe where there hasn't been as much rain, the honey hasn't filled as much in the cells, and I maybe haven't kept an eye on my ventilation as much, and I've had a little bit of condensation build up in the cells. And then a couple of the cells ended up getting this really dark kind of colour growing in them sort of thing, which I didn't like the look of. So I decided this spring to pull those frames off, like completely off the hive, and I harvested off the hive, which was really interesting as well to watch doing it in the kitchen and see how the cells. And then what Maris mentioned about the bees not filling the middle row of a couple of the ones, I actually sort of had the opposite, but when I put the key in, I could see that they weren't shifting. You know how in between each of the segments there's like a shifting, I could see that it wasn't shifting with the key and therefore not releasing the honey. And I did it quite a few times, and I managed to loosen it enough to get the honey out. And then I did some more research online, and I decided, even though it says that it voids the warranty, I decided to bite the bullet, and I pulled the whole thing apart just to see, because these frames were now 4 years old, and I was just seeing what was in there. Do you know what I mean? I was just getting really curious, so I pulled it apart, and I ended up doing like a really big deep clean of them, and various methods, and I ended up using a steam cleaner. Get all the wax and the bits and everything off, because those are beautiful and yellow, but like I can show you photos, mine were really, really dark, as frames are in the brood box that have been there for a few years. They're just almost, black and brown, and that's the colour that my flow frames were getting, was that really dark colour. And so I was just curious as to, I know you've been working on it for 10 years, but my flow frames are probably one of the oldest ones that in commercial use. So do you have any that you've been using for, say, longer than that, say 7 years or something like that? And have you needed to do a deep clean to get the wax and things out to enable the bits in between the segments to shift up and down with the key better?
Yeah, that's great. We really haven't been, like our older experiments, going back that far, we're not using those anymore because they were pretty clumsy and limited, and so really we're in the same situation as you. We've had, because when the crowdfunding happened and we declared it to the world, well, that's when we went and found a factory that would make, the flow frames with us, and we've been using those ones ever since, and then, slightly upgrading them. So generally we'll say the bees will keep them clean, but in your case, yeah, they seem to get wet. Sounds like they might have even got a bit mouldy or something.
Yeah.
And I think it's great you pulled them apart and cleaned them.
Yeah, I didn't understand exactly how it worked. I could see it working until you pull them apart and you've got it there, and there's like 100 pieces on the table.
Yeah.
And when you start to put it back together like a jigsaw,
Yeah.
and it's not actually that hard. Like in the end, the kids ended up buying out because I didn't clean them all, but I've done 8 frames now this spring.
Yeah.
I've done deep clean for them with the steam. And in the end, I outsourced it to the kids to put them back together.
Outsourced.
So yeah, and it made me understand now exactly how the key works to make the panel slide up and down to release the honey. So, but yeah, I was just curious because on the Flow forum there are quite a few people that are having similar issues after this winter where they've left the super on all winter and then the condensation's built up where there's been no honey and then
And it's got mouldy, manky, the technical word.
Manky, yeah.
Yes, I think that's, I mean, and I've used pressure cleaners, just had them on the ground and done that, and I think hot pressure cleaner would be better, but I just had a cold one. And one thing that can happen is if, when you're closing the flow frame after a harvest, and so you've put the key in the top slot to close them down again to make the cells, you know, hexagonal again. If that's just done a little bit loosely, I like to turn it and then just leave it there for a minute or two to try and make sure that the segments that are moving are pushed all the way back down. Because if they don't, then gradually wax and maybe propolis will build up in the little stoppers that make sure that moving segment stops at the proper place. And if that happens, then the cells are slightly out of a line that time, and then the time after that they get more out of a line until, you know, they're no longer a hexagonal cell and the bees are getting confused and so on. When that's happened, it's happened to I don't know how many people, I'd advise, you know, harvesting, pulling them out of the hive, putting them in really hot water, like 80 degrees, the plastic will handle that easily, and operating them then. And that hot water will, and the operation will mean the wax will squeeze in and out. And so that's one way, but you've had to pull yours apart.
We tried the pot first. We had a big stock pot and I just dumped the whole thing in and it got most of it off. But
Yeah,
still little
but not the last
bits
little
and
bits.
pieces. So
Yeah.
yeah, we tried a few different methods and we found in the end, it's like, you know, those Karcher steam cleaner things, that was the best just to give it a really good clean out. And when I put them back in the hive, I didn't even bother re-waxing them or anything. The bees just went straight to them and we were working them within minutes. So
Yeah, we've found it's actually quite difficult to remove the last layer of wax. There'll always be a little bit there. It's amazing stuff. And we've been doing that, a whole other thing, because, I mean, in Australia, to stop AFB, you declare it and you destroy your hives or you irradiate them. And so there's a whole story to talk about that. Some countries and some beekeepers don't have access to irradiation, and the countries and some states in the United States allow bleaching and all sorts of things. So we wanted to experiment with, can you remove enough wax from the flow frames for the bleach to penetrate? And it's pretty difficult. That's sort of where we're at with that particular experiment.
Yeah, g'day Stuart.
Just push the button up.
Congratulations, like everyone else is saying. I was just going to say with regards to parts, last year I put together a Flow hybrid before they were for sale. You could just buy the box.
Oh, great.
And I had to buy it bit by bit because the bases weren't readily available. I wanted the same roof, the whole bit. And I went online, contacted, and they sent me each bit.
Yeah.
They were really good and quick.
Yeah, you're quite right. I should have mentioned that if you contact our customer service,
Yeah, super.
They are a lovely bunch of people, and yeah.
But
So,
to do that, I got all those people. It was no trouble whatsoever.
yeah, so you did a sort of a personal order in a way,
Yeah.
rather than off the site. You
Yeah.
phoned them up and worked it out.
And they're under the pump, you know, with regards to production and all the rest of it. So you got to appreciate how hard it would be to get people saying, "I want a roof." No, well, we don't sell roofs, but they get you one. You know, which I appreciate.
Thanks for that.
And the second thing I was just going to say, on the videos and things like that, you said the little clear plastic 90-degree bend.
Yeah.
Is that something that might be available?
Yeah.
Just to stop, the only reason I say that is because you get the adjustment. For some reason, every time I do an extraction, it gets windy. And, which is, it's all right at the start, it's coming through a bit thicker, but then you get the last jar, which might take an hour and a half, and then it's doing this. I know you can do stuff with tubes and all that sort of stuff, but now with the Flow Hive too, I'm noticing with mine, I'm in the plumbing business, so I try and make up my own little bits and pieces. So I've got nice little fan that will fit on there. But then I noticed yesterday with the shelf, it's slightly sticking out a bit too far.
So so your elbow pushes it. Yeah. So we are going to put that on, but I don't know when, and it amazes me how long it takes.
I know there's a million things that everyone wants.
No, that plus some sort of manifold that connects the frames together, so that particularly for the commercial, they can extract the whole super at once into one large tub. We just seem to say, well, if we're gonna do this right, then it should have this feature and that feature, and then we get bogged down in design, and then so a simple elbow, I think, is a good idea, and I've been pushing it for probably 18 months now, and it's still, little clear one, I mean, I have cut our tubes, cut a 45 on them, and used glued them together, and then dipped the whole thing in beeswax, so the honey's only touching beeswax, and use that. But of course, if you like to play around like that.
Thanks, Stuart. I think we might leave it there. I think we'll let you sit down.
Well, look, thank you very much for this opportunity, and there's so many things to talk about, and I really do enjoy it. So thank you very much.